Hello and welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson, and this is a bonus episode to celebrate the Feast of St. Nicholas. I'm in Australia, so our dates may differ from yours. This is the Lay of St. Nicholas from the Ingoldsby Legends, and it was recorded into the public domain by Grant Herlock. I've trimmed the start of the chapter, which is frame narrative. However, I'd like to keep two parts. The first is that St. Nicholas is a patron of mariners and also a patron of thieves, and according to the author of the Ingoldsby Legends, sometimes thieves call themselves the Clerks of St. Nicholas. The monster given in this story is one that has already been started up for Ars Magica. You can find it in Realms of Power, the Infernal, and I'll avoid giving away the plot by holding my peace there.
Lord Abbot, I'd fain confess I am a-weary and worn with woe. Many a grief doth my heart oppress, and haunt me whithersoever I go. On bended knee spake the beautiful maid, Now lithe and listen, Lord Abbot, to me. Now nay, fair daughter, the Lord Abbot said, Now nay, in sooth it may hardly be. There is Mess Michael, and holy Mess John, Sage penitauncers I ween be they, and hard by doth dwell in St. Catherine's cell, Ambrose the anchorite, old and grey. Oh, I will have none of Ambrose or John, Those sage penitauncers I trow they be. Shrive me may none save the Abbot alone. Now listen, Lord Abbot, I speak to thee, Nor think foul scorn, though mitre adorn thy brow, To listen to shrift of mine. I am a maiden royally born, And I come of old Plantagenet's line. Though hither I stray in lowly array, I am a damsel of high degree, And the Comte of Eu and the Lord of Ponthieu, They serve my father on bended knee. Counts a many and Dukes a few A suitoring came to my father's hall, But the Duke of Lorraine, with his large domain, He pleased my father beyond them all. Dukes a many and Counts a few I would have wedded right cheerfully, But the Duke of Lorraine was uncommonly plain, And I vow'd that he ne'er should my bridegroom be. So hither I fly in lowly guise From their gilded domes and their princely halls. Fain would I dwell in some holy cell, Or within some convent's peaceful walls. Then out and spake that proud Lord Abbot, Now rest thee, fair daughter, withouten fear, Nor Count nor Duke but shall meet the rebuke Of Holy Church, an he seek thee here. Holy Church denieth all search Midst her sanctified ewes and her saintly rams, And the wolves doth mock who would scathe her flock, Or especially worry her little pet lambs. Then lay, fair daughter, thy fears aside, For here this day shalt thou dine with me. Now nay, the fair maiden cried, In sooth, Lord Abbot, that scarce may be. Friends would whisper, and foes would frown, Sith thou art a churchman of high degree, And ill mote it match with thy fair renown, That a wandering damsel dine with thee. There is Simon the Deacon, hath pulse in store, With beans and lettuces fair to see. His Lenten fare now let me share, I pray thee, Lord Abbot, in charity. Though Simon the Deacon hath pulse in store, To our patron saint foul shame it were, Should way-worn guest, with toil oppress'd, Meet in his abbey such churlish fare. There is Peter the Prior, and Francis the Friar, And Roger the Monk shall our convives be. Small scandal I ween shall then be seen, They are a goodly company. The Abbot hath donn'd his mitre and ring, His rich dalmatic and manciple fine, And the choristers sing, as the lay brothers bring To the board a magnificent turkey and chine. The turkey and chine they are done to a nicety, Liver and gizzard and all are there, Ne'er mote Lord Abbot pronounce benedicite Over more luscious or delicate fare. But no pious stave, no Pater or Ave Pronounced as he gazed on that maiden's face. She asked him for stuffing, she asked him for gravy, She asked him for gizzard, but not for grace. Yet gaily the Lord Abbot smiled and press'd, and the blood red wine in the wine cup fill'd, And he help'd his guest to a bit of the breast, And he sent the drumsticks down to be grill'd. There was no lack of old sherry sack, Of Hippocras fine, or of Malmsey bright, And aye as he drain'd off his cup with a smack, He grew less pious and more polite. She pledged him once, and she pledged him twice, And she drank as lady ought not to drink, And he press'd her hand 'neath the table thrice, And he wink'd as Abbot ought not to wink. And Peter the Prior and Francis the Friar Sat each with a napkin under his chin, But Roger the Monk got excessively drunk, So they put him to bed, and they tuck'd him in. The lay brothers gazed on each other amazed, And Simon the Deacon, with grief and surprise, As he peep'd through the key hole, could scarce fancy real The scene he beheld, or believe his own eyes. In his ear was ringing the Lord Abbot singing, He could not distinguish the words very plain, But 'twas all about coal, and jolly old soul, And fiddlers, and punch, and things quite as profane. Even Porter Paul, at the sound of such revellin', With fervour himself began to bless, For he thought he must somehow have let the devil in, And perhaps was not very much out in his guess. The accusing Byres flew up to Heaven's chancery, Blushing like scarlet with shame and concern. The Archangel took down his tale, and in answer he Wept, see the works of the late Mr. Sterne. Indeed, it is said, a less taking both were in, When after a lapse of a great many years, They booked Uncle Toby 5 shillings for swearing, And blotted the fine out again with their tears. But St. Nicholas' agony who may paint? His senses at first were well nigh gone, The beatified Saint was ready to faint, When he saw in his Abbey such sad goings on. For never, I ween, had such doings been seen There before from the time that most excellent Prince, Earl Baldwin of Flanders, and other commanders, Had built and endowed it some centuries since. But hark ! 'tis a sound from the outermost gate, A startling sound from a powerful blow. Who knocks so late? It is half after 8 By the clock, and the clock's 5 minutes too slow. Never perhaps had such loud double raps Been heard in St. Nicholas' Abbey before. All agreed it was shocking to keep people knocking, But none seem'd inclined to answer the door. Now a louder bang through the cloisters rang, And the gate on its hinges wide open flew, And all were aware of a Palmer there, With his cockle, hat, staff, and his sandal shoe. Many a furrow and many a frown By toil and time on his brow were traced, And his long loose gown was of ginger brown, And his rosary dangled below his waist. Now seldom, I ween, is such costume seen, Except at a stage play or masquerade, But who doth not know it was rather the go With pilgrims and saints in the Second Crusade? With noiseless stride did that Palmer glide Across that oaken floor, And he made them all jump, he gave such a thump Against the refectory door. Wide open it flew, and plain to the view The Lord Abbot they all mote see. In his hand was a cup, and he lifted it up, ' Here's the Pope's good health with 3 ' Rang in their ears 3 deafening cheers, Hosea, Hosea, Hosea! And one of the party said, ' Go it, my hearty,' When out spake that Pilgrim grey, ' A boon, Lord Abbot, a boon, a boon ! Worn is my foot, and empty my scrip, And nothing to speak of since yesterday noon Of food, Lord Abbot, hath passed my lip. And I am come from a far country, And have visited many a holy shrine, And long have I trod the sacred sod Where the Saints do rest in Palestine. And thou art come from a far country, And if thou in Paynim lands hast been, Now read me aright the most wonderful sight, Thou Palmer grey, that thine eyes have seen. Read me aright the most wonderful sight, Grey Palmer, that ever thine eyes did see, And a manchet of bread, and a good warm bed, And a cup of the best shall thy guerdon be. Oh, I have been East, and I have been West, And I have seen many a wonderful sight, But never to me did it happen to see A wonder like that which I see this night. To see a Lord Abbot in rochet and stole, With Prior and Friar, a strange marvell, Or a jolly full bowl, sitting cheek by jowl, And hobnobbing away with a devil from Hell. He felt in his gown of ginger brown, And he pull'd out a flask from beneath. It was rather tough work to get out the cork, But he did it at last with his teeth. O'er a pint and a quarter of holy water He made a sacred sign, And he dash'd the whole on the soi disant daughter Of old Plantagenet's line. Oh, then did she reek, and squeak, and shriek, With a wild unearthly scream, And fizzled and hiss'd, and produced such a mist, They were all half choked by the steam. Her dove-like eyes turned to coals of fire, Her beautiful nose to a horrible snout, Her hands to paws with nasty great claws, And her bosom went in, and her tail came out. On her chin there appear'd a long nanny goat's beard, And her tusks and her teeth no man mote tell, And her horns and her hoofs gave infallible proofs 'Twas a frightful fiend from the nethermost hell. The Palmer threw down his ginger gown, His hat and his cockle, and plain to sight Stood St. Nicholas' self, and his shaven crown Had a glow worm halo of heavenly light. The fiend made a grasp the Abbot to clasp, But St. Nicholas lifted his holy toe, And just in the nick let fly such a kick On his elderly namesake, he made him let go, And out of the window he flew like a shot, For the foot flew up with a terrible thwack, And caught the foul demon about the spot Where his tail joins on to the small of his back, And he bounded away like a football at play, Till into the bottomless pit he fell slap, Knocking Mammon the meagre, or Percy Belphegor, and Lucifer into Beelzebub's lap. Oh, happy the slip from his succubine grip That saved the Lord Abbot, though breathless with fright. In escaping he tumbled and fractured his hip, And his left leg was shorter thenceforth than his right. On the banks of the Rhine, as he's stopping to dine, From a certain inn window the traveller is shown Most picturesque ruins, the scene of these doings, Some miles up the river, south east of Cologne. And while sauerkraut she sells you, the landlady tells you That there in those walls, now all roofless and bare, One Simon a deacon from a lean grew a sleek one On filling a ci devant Abbot's state chair. How a ci devant Abbot, all cloaked in drab butt, Of texture the coarsest, hair, shirt, and no shoes, His mitre and ring, and all that sort of thing, Laid aside, in yon cave lived a pious recluse. How he rose with the sun, limping dot and go one To yon rill of the mountain in all sorts of weather, Where a Prior and a Friar, who lived somewhat higher Up the rock, used to come and eat cresses together. How a thirsty old codger, the neighbours called Roger, With them drank cold water in lieu of old wine. What its quality wanted he, made up in quantity, Swigging as though he would empty the Rhine. And how as their bodily strength failed, the mental man Gained tenfold vigour and force in all four, And how to the day of their death the old gentleman Never attempted to kidnap them more. And how when at length in the odour of sanctity All of them died without grief or complaint, The monks of St. Nicholas said 'twas ridiculous Not to suppose every one was a saint. And how in the Abbey no one was so shabby As not to say yearly 4 masses a head On the eve of that supper, and kick on the crupper Which Satan received for the souls of the dead. How folks long held in reverence their relics and memories, how the ci devant Abbots obtained greater still, when some cripples, on touching his fractured os femoris, threw down their crutches and danced a quadrille ; And how Abbot Simon, who turned out a prime one, These words, which grew into a proverb full soon, O'er the late Abbot's grotto Stuck up as a motto, ' Who sups with the Devil should have a long spoon.'